sugar. Do you have a love-hate relationship with sugar? You know you should eliminate it from your diet, but Starbucks, fudge brownies, cookies, donuts, juice. Well, life's too short to not enjoy those, right? We consume 180 pounds of sugar per person per year. That's 1 cup per day. If you want to get control of your sugar cravings, you pushed play to the right episode. You are listening to the Renewed Mama podcast. I'm Kimberly Mutar, and I help mamas like you stay renewed. Renewed in your thoughts that are on repeat while you wash dishes or scrub the toilets. Renewed in the words you say to yourself and to your children when it's the best day ever and when it spirals into chaos and temper tantrums. Renewed in how you respond so that you keep showing up as the mama you want to be. But wait, mama, there is more to us to renew than just our thoughts, our words, and our responses. We are whole people. In order to renew full body, all of us as moms, we need to focus on our health and our home environment. So we're talking about nutrition, balancing hormones, exercising, supporting our adrenals and thyroid, pelvic floor health, detoxing our homes, gut health, picky eaters, and more. I hope these special episodes help you to renew your health and your home. My special guest is Rachel Murray, and we are talking sugar. Rachel is a registered holistic nutritionist and sugar addiction recovery coach. Her mission is to help women with sugar addiction ditch all the diets and find food freedom for life. As a registered nurse, she transitioned to holistic nutrition to better serve women who struggle with sugar addiction. She helps women balance their hormones, gain more energy, stabilize their moods, reduce hot flashes and night sweats, and gain overall better health and well-being by focusing on nutrient-dense meals, whole food supplementation, and living in tune with nature. Well, welcome to the Renewed Mama podcast, Rachel. I'm super excited to have this conversation with you. Let's talk sugar.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Kimberly. I'm really excited to be here.
Yes. Well, I have learned that we consume 180 pounds of sugar per person per year. That's like 1 cup of sugar per day. That's crazy.
It has definitely increased in the last 100, 150 years. The big thing about that is that a lot of the sugar that we're consuming isn't even, it's not added sugar. Like it's in the products that we use on a daily basis. So we don't necessarily know that we're consuming all that sugar.
Right. I'm glad that you say that because that sugar, that 180 pounds of sugar, I mean, that's even more than my body weight per year. That's in your sodas, that's in your Gatorades, that's in the cereals, that's in the chocolate milk. Like, where else are we finding that sugar that's already in the product, but we're not adding extra sugar?
Yeah. So in addition to what you just mentioned, we see it in salad dressings, in tomato sauces, things like that we don't necessarily think of as tasting sweet, in crackers and bread products, all kinds of places it's hiding.
Right. Of course, in our donuts.
Yeah.
Tell us how you came to helping women with sugar addiction, ditching the diets and finding actual food freedom, because the reality is that sugar is addicting. The more we have it, the more we want it, right?
Yeah. So I kind of came into this space serendipitously. I started my career as a nurse, and through my own health challenges, looked into nutrition and how that could support my own goals. But I really transitioned into focusing on women who are struggling with sugar addiction and the related hormone imbalances, because of one client that I really she was just challenging to work with, not personality wise, but she just had a lot what I would call addictive qualities around sugar and food. And at the time, I didn't label it as that. I didn't really understand it, but I was looking for ways to support her and came upon this whole concept of sugar addiction. And through that, I wanted to take some additional training. And with that training, there was a what was called the sugar assessments. It was through this process of trying to help that client that I took this training and discovered that I was addicted to sugar, and realized that almost all of the clients that I had helped in the past had some form of sugar addiction. So I really wanted to focus on helping those women, because there are some different strategies that we can use to help support people who are struggling with those cravings. So that kind of brings us up to today and where my focus lies.
Yeah, that's neat. That's neat. Help us to understand how sugar and its cravings, like what effect does that have on our bodies as women, our husbands, even our children? What's that doing to us?
Yeah, so many of the effects overlap with men, women, children, but we can start with what I commonly see in women. And the most obvious or the most common reason people come to me is help with weight gain. But we also see this as an increased risk for type 2 diabetes, as well as cardiovascular issues, cancers. Because even if weight gain isn't an issue, it doesn't diminish the risk for these other health conditions. Mm-hmm. And we can have someone who's either underweight or normal weight. And some people in this space have labeled these people as TOFI. So that stands for thin on the outside, but fat on the inside, because what the body does with sugar when we consume too much is it wants to store it away, because sugar is toxic. So what it does is stores this fat around our internal organs. So we don't necessarily see this showing up on our body as like that subcutaneous fat, but this stored fat around our organs can really contribute to the risk of diabetes and cardiovascular diseases as well. So
that must be the fatty liver that we're seeing in children and stuff. That's what you're talking about.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, around the liver is one of the biggest places that the body will store that sugar. But we also see sugar disrupting hormone balance. So, and I'm not just talking about progesterone and estrogen, although those are really big imbalances that are on the rise. But insulin, issues with insulin sensitivity, we see these energy crashes and spikes throughout the day. So we're feeling tired or wired. It interrupts our sleep, our mood. It affects our menstrual cycles and our fertility. So all kinds of things that sugar can contribute to. And looking at children, we often see it as behavioral challenges. So it might be hyperactivity, or also difficulty concentrating in school because, again, of those sugar spikes and crashes. We can also see it showing up as dental decay, and their taste preferences actually change. So they start to prefer these sugary foods, sugary processed foods, rather than whole, natural, unprocessed foods.
Right.
I think just one other thing that I kind of wanted to talk about in terms of women and children is that early repeated exposure to sugar has been now shown to actually increase that risk of developing the sugar addiction, which is where my focus is. And we know that sugar we can classify it as a psychoactive drug, because the psychoactive drug is basically anything that changes the chemistry or how our brain works. So sugar becomes this reward, just like the effects that we would experience with a drug like cocaine or alcohol. So just a really important thing to understand, because if, even in utero, we can be exposing our unborn child to sugar. This can impact their risk for developing sugar addiction later in life. So it's never too early to start, but that doesn't mean that, if your children are growing or they're adults, there's still things that we can do to support this.
Okay, there's so many good things to touch on there, Rachel, like how key it is. I mean, even when I was pregnant, you're always thinking about, okay, what should I or shouldn't I eat, but what to bless the baby and to nourish the baby. But I never even thought about sugar.
Right.
Affecting the baby, and then perhaps establishing that sugar addiction even at that young age. But are you saying, Rachel, that we never have any sugar? Maybe our listeners are saying, what? Take out all the sugar. I know that there's natural forms of sugar. So give us some balanced perspective on what life looks like. We really do want to detox our bodies from the sugar, but how do we do it in a balanced approach, instead of being like, we're throwing all the sugar out of the house and no more cereals and no more donuts and no more sugar in my coffee and all of that?
Yeah, I think, it really does depend on where you're starting from, where your family is starting from, and how you want to approach that. And, perhaps the age of your children also, falls into how you're going to approach that. And absolutely, when you're just dealing with yourself, then of course it can be a lot simpler to make some changes. But when we're involving the whole family, then we do want to be strategic about it. And I think the best place to really start is just focusing the majority of our meals on whole, unprocessed foods. And that's obviously going to look a lot different for different families, because we have taste preferences as well. I mean, I can go through some of the more nutrient-dense foods and some of the foods that I would recommend avoiding as much as possible, if that's helpful.
Oh, definitely. Yes. I know in our family's journey, we've really focused on adding the proteins and the fats. So yeah, tell us what that practically looks like on our plate, even examples for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, because the reality is we're all rushing out the door, whether it is for breakfast or for dinner, because there's activities in the evening or whatever. And what does that really look like, instead of driving through the McDonald's drive-through or grabbing the cereal box or the Pop-Tart?
Right. Yeah. So why don't I start with, I'll just run through a list of what the most nutrient dense foods are, and then we can kind of go through some examples. So, and I don't want to scare anybody with these nutrient dense foods, because I know some of them probably aren't the most palatable if you're not used to eating them. But the first one is organ meats. So, liver, even heart can be a good one, because it's more of a muscle meat flavor. So it can be a good jumping off point. But something like liver is really nutrient dense. Fish, and I like to use the acronym SMASH. So that stands for salmon, mackerel, anchovies, sardines, and herring. So those are really great choices in terms of fish, because they have that important protein that you're talking about, but also some really good omega-3 fats. Dark green leafy vegetables, bivalves, which are like seafood, crustaceans. Goat meat is actually very nutrient dense. I know it's not a popular one, but it is accessible around us. Beef, so that one's pretty easy to incorporate. Eggs, again, So many ways we can cook eggs or include them
Mm-hmm.
into recipes. Milk, and then we go to things like canned fish. If you can have it with the bones, then that's helpful because you're going to get calcium and some other important minerals. And then lamb. So those are kind of the top ones. And then cheeses and other animal meats, yogurts, things like that. Those are also really nutrient dense. So if we can focus the majority of our proteins coming from those foods, other than the dark green leafy vegetables, you're not going to see a whole lot of protein in there, but the other ones, a great place to kind of jump off from and incorporate those in. In terms of some like breakfast, lunch, and dinner examples, again, this is really going to depend on your taste preferences. But one thing I really like to suggest is to throw away your concepts of what a breakfast food has to look like, because you mentioned the cereals and drive-through things like bagels and things like that. It doesn't have to be what the media has told us is a breakfast food. So if going back to eggs, I think that that's a pretty common one, but we could do meats for breakfast. Like it could be any kind of meat. It could be a leftover from the night before. We can do meatballs. That's one that our family loves because you can make a whole bunch and cook them and freeze them and then just reheat them really easily. So kind of throwing away your conceptions of what breakfast looks like and more focusing on what can I put in my body that's really going to give me the nutrition to give me that energy for the whole day.
Right. Well, I love leftovers for breakfast. And you're right. I often tell the kids, we were talking about, incorporating your children in this sugar detox. And I often tell them we have a diesel truck. And every time I go to the gas pump, I'm always like double checking to make sure that I don't put unleaded gas in the diesel truck. I don't want to have to call up my husband and said, oh no, I filled the truck up with the wrong fuel. And so I say our truck runs better on diesel. Obviously, that's what it's designed to run on. And so it's the same thing with our bodies. How can we fuel, like what on your plate is fueling your body, your brain, your muscles, everything to run really well today? And if we have the conversation or look at the ingredients that are in the cereals and those like you said, the classic what the media or society has told us are our breakfast foods, it's not fueling them for but a moment. It's only fueling the sugar spike that they're going to get as they arrive at school, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I love that analogy with the car. That is a great way of explaining it to our children and to the men in our lives because they get that. They get that analogy.
Right. There's also the key. I mean, tell me how it is in your house. If you don't bring it in, then it's just not available to eat. Is that one way that you've helped to detox the family of the sugar in the house?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my son, he's 4. I like to really include him in on all the decisions that we make, and I educate him as we go through the grocery store. We talk about what the foods, like you were saying, how they're going to fuel our bodies. And, there are times where he wants certain foods that we have a conversation about it. And it's just, those aren't things that we bring into our home. And it doesn't always go smoothly, but I'm the parent here. I'm the adult. So we do have to make these decisions about what we have in our home because just like children, for adults too, if we have it there, then it's much more likely, it's much easier that we're going to want to eat it. So our home is really the most important place that we can start with this. So the foods that we have around us in our homes, it's really going to, set us up for the best day, or it can put us in a position where we've kind of compromised our health and and are functioning for the rest of the day.
Right, right. And in terms of our children, we want to raise them up to make the right choices too when they get to decide what's in their home or, in their college dorm or whatever, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I think having those simple analogies that children can understand is really helpful, because it's not just saying, no, we don't eat that. You give a good reason why. Explain it in such a way that they can understand.
Right. It's helping our children, I think, become aware of what they're feeling in their body and what they're experiencing. Yeah. I know that oftentimes we will, or I'll even hear my children saying to each other, have you had too much sugar? If someone's emotions are kind of out all over the place. And yet I think that it's so key to helping them think through, what am I feeling right now? Like, what did I eat? Did I have enough water today? Those are all conversations. Did I go poo today? How many times did I go poo? Those are all conversations that we have in our house, at least. And I think it just brings awareness to what they're putting in their body and how that's coming out.
That's another really great point, is that as adults, many of us weren't walked through that process of understanding what goes into our body, both whether it's food or, what we're getting from TV or social media. All of these inputs that go into our body have a consequence. So educating our children as young as possible to understand and make those connections can be really valuable as they grow up. So, yeah.
Yeah. I can. I used to play field hockey when I was in high school, and it was like the first time that Mom ever gave us lunch money. And so I ate for lunch every day 2 Little Debbie's snack cakes. Now, I know they're not called Little Debbie's in Canada, but in the United States they were. Little Debbie's, so the peanut butter chocolate bars. And then I would get out, 3:00, 3:30 on the hockey field and be like, come on, body, run. I would will my legs to run as fast as they could, but I felt like they were so slow. And it never even dawned on me, or I didn't have the teaching to say, whoa, wait a second, what are you eating at lunchtime? It's not enough to fuel you through a whole field hockey practice, right? Or a game.
Yeah. And that's a simple experiment that we can even do at home. We can try something for breakfast that's a good quality protein with some healthy fats, and then a more carbohydrate focused meal, and that doesn't include those protein and fats, and then see how we feel in a couple of hours. And we can do this with our kids as well. And then they're able to make that connection.
Yeah, we like doing science experiments like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what you can say. Hey guys, let's do a little science experiment with our body.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to go back to the value of the protein and the fats to keep us satisfied. I do think, would you say, Rachel, that that's what will help curb or reduce those sugar cravings for us?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Protein plays a crucial role in keeping our appetite regulated and making us feel satisfied, because protein, it I don't want to say slows our digestion, but it digests at a nice regulated pace so that our blood sugar levels stay back. So in the long run, focusing on the protein is going to prevent overeating. It promotes a healthy body composition because we're getting those amino acids that are going to support muscle building, which for women, especially as we age, becomes even more important. But with that blood sugar balance, is going to prevent that energy spike and then the subsequent crash throughout the day, so that we're not experiencing those cravings at 3:00 or in the evening time. If we've ensured that we get the appropriate amount of protein and healthy fats earlier in the day. In terms of satiety, absolutely critical, but protein does a whole lot of other things for us as well.
So, Rachel, give us some suggestions for natural sugar alternatives. What can we use to sweeten our coffee or add to protein bars or something like that that we make at home?
The science is still kind of out on the safety of some of the sweeteners. I mean, there's definitely some literature out there talking about the dangers of many of them. So the NutraSweet, aspartame, those ones, we definitely know that they're connected with some cancers and some other negative health consequences. But some of the more natural ones, such as stevia, which is really popular right now, monk fruit, those are some of the safer ones. Again, I think there's still some research out there that needs to be concluded on those, but we do see the safety of these as better than those artificial sweeteners. The one thing with stevia is that there are some artificial stevias and some more natural ones, so you do want to just make sure that you're reading the label and knowing where it's coming from.
And then we have our honey and our maple syrup, right?
I do use those occasionally in my house. Honey would probably be the more common one, just because it does have a few other potential health benefits as opposed to maple syrup. But again, if that's something that you feel like you can easily moderate in your diet, then I don't see any harm in having those in small amounts. When it comes to how sugar is processed in the body, when we're just looking at the sugar piece, it's alone, the body doesn't differentiate. Like, it doesn't say, oh, this is honey, oh, this is maple syrup. It breaks it down into those small particles, and it understands it as sugar. So it's, okay. You know, a lot of people are like, say, oh, I don't use table sugar, I use coconut sugar because it's so much healthier. But in the long run, it's the same thing in our body. So
what snacks can you suggest? Kid-friendly snacks, mom-friendly snacks that are high in those proteins and fats that are going to sustain us? Like, I'm thinking kids getting off the bus after school, or on their way to their hockey practice, or we're even going on a picnic or a hike. What healthy snacks can we take that everybody's going to love, but it's going to keep those crashes away?
Some simple ones, if you have somewhere to keep it cool. So if it's after school or you have an insulated lunchbox, then yogurt is great. So especially Greek yogurt, it's higher in protein, and then you can pair that with all kinds of different things. So if you want it more on like the sweet side, you can do some fruit, some berries, something like that, and make it kind of like a parfait. Mm-hmm. Or you can add some spices into the Greek yogurt and make it like a vegetable dip, and have it with some cucumbers or carrot sticks, things like that. Cheese slices with either whole grain or the seed crackers have become really popular, the Mary's crackers. And those are nice because they don't have the vegetable oils in them that we can also talk about. Hard-boiled eggs are great because you can make a ton of those ahead of time and bring them with you. And again, have those with veggies or nuts or fruits. Nut butters on those seed crackers. Hummus or guacamole is great. Cottage cheese. Trail mixes can be really, really good, but I do recommend looking for one that either doesn't have the vegetable oils or just making it at home. So using your own nuts and seeds and making your own blend. Mm-hmm. And then a couple other things that go really well with my son. We just call them meat roll-ups. So I just look for good quality, ham or prosciutto, things like that, lunch meats, and then we roll them up, either veggies inside or cheeses, kind of depends on the day. But yeah, there's lots of different options. And then one that I mentioned before is the meatballs. Again, you can make up meatballs with, beef, turkey, chicken. And then if they're anything like my son and my husband, they like anything that they have, they want to dip it in something. So again, you can make up a yogurt dip or something else to really just top up that protein.
Yeah, those are fantastic suggestions. I'm curious to know, I had the thought about protein for right before bed for our children. Does that help them to sleep better?
And for some people, they do need that extra snack before bed. The really nice thing about children is that when we start to feed them whole unprocessed foods, their bodies do an amazing job of regulating their appetite because they haven't, or we hope that they haven't been through any of this dieting that has really influenced their metabolism. So I know for my son, dinner is usually the smallest meal of the day for him, and that works for him.
You mentioned about the vegetable oils. What were you thinking about that?
So earlier we had talked about the most nutrient dense foods, and I thought, the kind of jumping off point from that would, if we could go to the other end of things, the foods that we really want to avoid as much as possible. So collectively we're gonna just call these, ultra processed foods, but what these foods usually contain are vegetable oils. So and you might also hear these called seed oils, and some of them do come from seeds, but really they're some kind of vegetable oil. It could be soybean, sunflower, safflower, corn, cottonseed, canola, rice bran, and grapeseed are the big ones. There are some others that might sneak in there too, but those are the most common ones that you're going to see on a label. Yeah, collectively, the vegetable oils in processed foods, we're also commonly going to see things like refined grains, sugars or sweeteners, artificial flavors or colors, or some combination of these things. So things like breakfast cereals are a perfect example. A lot of them are brightly colored. They have added sugars. They're going to have those grains and then some kind of oil. Packaged cookies, or cakes, like you were talking about, the Little Debbie's, for sure that they would contain some of these items. Any packaged baked good, chips, and then we get into things that aren't necessarily sweet tasting, but they're still highly processed. So a lot of crackers, frozen meals, microwave popcorn, of course, our candies and chocolate bars, and then even fruit flavored drinks. So we really have to be careful with those drinks. They most often aren't going to contain the vegetable oils, but they're going to contain a combination of those other things I mentioned. And then lastly, even some breads and pastas we want to be careful about. Why these vegetable oils are not friendly to our body in comparison to the natural fats that are going to come with our proteins, as well as like an olive oil or a coconut oil. These can be really healthy fats, but the vegetable oils, the way that they're processed is quite complicated, and the history behind that. These oils started out back when things were becoming industrialized, and they were used as lubricant for machinery. So, and then in World War II, that was really important with everything that they were having to build and create. But then at the end of that era, they were left with all these lubricants, and instead of just disposing of them and forgetting about them, they went the route of trying to figure out how they could make a profit off of these, and so they deodorized them, they put dyes in them, and they turned them into a food product. So really, really kind of scary, how these products have then been turned into something that we consume. So yeah, they're bleached, they're deodorized, they're rancid, It's really not contributing to our health in any way. Yeah.
Rachel, do they just kind of build up in our body, or because how can our body detox from those? What happens with them once they're inside?
Yeah. And that's a really great question because if we compare, I mean, there's been some debate like what's worse, the sugar or the vegetable oils. And, you know, even though my focus is really on the sugar and limiting, you know, the overconsumption of that, vegetable oils are actually more dangerous because the body does, again, see it as a toxin. What the body does with toxins, if it can't get rid of it right away, is that it will store it in our body. So these become part of our cells, and all the cells in our body are surrounded by a lipid or a fat layer. So if those are the types of fats that we're consuming, then that's what's going to, that's what our cells are going to be composed of, is this toxic fat. So yeah, our body does hold on to them, and then that becomes what we're made of. And they're stored a lot longer than sugars. I mean, sugars are, even if it's a processed sugar, our body does understand a little bit more of how to process that. So when we're talking about detoxing and getting rid of them, then the vegetable oils are by far more dangerous.
Yeah, we've been reading labels with the kids as part of our homeschool, and they'll say, "Oh, this has canola oil." It has the bad oil. But actually, that brings me to the next thing. I mean, we could classify things. We could say, oh, it's bad and we don't want it in our house. Or is there a way to have like as a family to say, okay, this is a never ever list. It just really has to go on the never ever list because it doesn't fuel our body well and it isn't good. Or can we have a sometimes list, or this is like a fun night list where every once in a great while we're enjoying this food, or how can we have a good perspective on that?
Yeah, I think that that's a really great question. And again, I'm going to have to say that it's going to depend on your own family, where you're starting from. If you are dealing with any specific health issues, then being more strict is probably going to benefit you more in the long run. And I think it's a matter of perspective, because I think some people, some of us are, if you've ever read Gretchen Rubin's books, some of us are abstainers and some of us are moderators. For moderators, when you tell them you can never have this again, that makes them want to rebel. It's just a natural part of their biology. Whereas someone who's an abstainer actually prefers to have that all or nothing thinking where, it's like this is what we want to focus on. These are the healthy foods and these are the no foods for our family. So, and you might have a combination of those people within your family, right? So it's important to understand that. And I think, we set some ground rules. These are the foods that we know are going to fuel our body, and we can phrase it in such a way, like if they have a certain sport that they like, then this is going to help you play hockey better, or, meet those goals that you're aiming for in school. Maybe they have some academic achievements that they're working towards. So framing it in such a way that that's going to resonate with them. And I mean, absolutely, I would like to say that, those processed foods that contain those vegetable oils would be on your never list. But if that's going to create more conflict in your family, then I think it's important to acknowledge that as well, and maybe you just make some exceptions around those.
Right. I can look back over our journey in terms of watching what we're consuming. And we've had those moments where it was like, okay, this for sure is not going in the grocery cart. But, I know that the week is busy or we're away. Like we were just away at a hockey tournament, and I took cereal because they wouldn't allow I was going to bring like my frying pan, because before I brought my frying pan and I was going to make my eggs and I was going to make my, bring my pre-cooked bacon and all of this stuff and just warm it up there. But they said no, and no cooking appliances. So I was like, okay, well, we're going to go with cereal and yogurt, right? We just have to give ourselves grace sometimes too, if we know that we're busy moms and we're trying to nourish our families as best as we can, but we have to be a little bit balanced in our perspective and not beat ourselves up when we do have to rely on the crackers or something like that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's another great point. It's like, these aren't foods that we're going to bring into the house. But when my son goes to a birthday party, we do still have some boundaries. So in our family, we don't drink pop. I just, there's no good reason why they need to drink it. He can have water. He can have milk. He can have the fizzy water if he wants, like a plain fizzy water. But we're not going to have the pop if it's there. But if he wants a cupcake or a piece of whatever they're serving in terms of the dessert, I'm not going to deprive of him that and make him feel excluded from everybody else. So, when we go out for a special occasion, then we can make that exception there. But we don't bring those into our home.
Yeah, this is all so good. I know, Rachel, that you help women balance their hormones, eliminate the hot flashes, the night sweats, the mood swings. So tell us how you do that.
In terms of the hormone balance piece, it is multifaceted. So it's going to really depend on, again, where my client is starting from. And of course, we focus in terms of the food on a nutrient dense diet. So everything that we've already talked about, protein, the natural fats, vegetables, fruits. For some people, it includes the whole grains as well. For some people, those aren't helpful. Then sometimes incorporating what are called phytoestrogens from foods. So this can be ground flax seeds, soy can be helpful for some people, legumes. These can all be helpful for regulating some estrogen and progesterone balance in the body. But again, it does depend on the person. But apart from the food, there are some other really important things that we can do. And one of them that it's starting to get talked about a little bit more is really tuning into our circadian rhythm. So what this looks like is getting some natural light first thing in the morning, so that even if it's not sunny outside, if we can get that natural light on our eyes and our skin, it's going to tell our body, okay, these are the hormones that I need to start releasing. These are the ones I need to start roping in. So insulin is going to be really important. Cortisol, again, we hear cortisol talked a lot about in terms of stress, and it is a stress hormone, but it's also like your get up and go hormone. So we naturally see a cortisol rise first thing in the morning, and that's what gives us some of our energy. Mm-hmm. So getting that light on our eyes can be really, really helpful. And then on the opposite side of that, avoiding the really bright blue lights. So from our devices, even overhead lights in our house, avoiding those in the evening and moving into the night can be also really helpful in giving our body those messages to know what hormones to then release and tamper down on. And then we also look at things like moving our body. So if we want to call this exercise, movement, whatever feels good for you, just getting our body moving is also really important. Stress management, and this can look like so many different things. It really depends on the person, where they're at, what they're facing. It could just be, taking a couple minutes to do some deep breaths throughout the day. It could be, a scheduled meditation practice, doing something like Tai Chi or yoga. So it really has to resonate with the person, but we do have to incorporate some kind of stress management technique because we're all facing some degree of stress, especially as, moms with busy schedules. So, and of course, tying into that stress management and that circadian rhythm is getting enough sleep, and women do generally need more sleep than men. So this is, it's not a competition about who can thrive on the least amount of sleep, we do need to really prioritize that. This isn't something that I do, but there are bioidentical hormone replacement that we can access through like a more natural practitioner that can be really helpful if it's something that we need, because sometimes we can't achieve everything just through a natural approach, and sometimes we do need those bioidentical hormones, even if it's just for a short period of time.
So much to our bodies and the makeup. Okay, Rachel, I've seen you talk on social media about holding off on coffee as the first thing in the morning. Like, tell us about that. What about all of the moms who say, don't talk to me until I've had my first coffee of the day?
Right. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. I do like a good cup of coffee, but what happens when we have coffee first thing in the morning? Yeah. It can really negatively impact our hormones, because I talked about that cortisol piece. So cortisol naturally wants to rise in the morning so that we have that natural energy. If we have that coffee first before anything else, is that it's going to impact that cortisol level and can really create this big spike, which can feel stressful. Our body can actually feel, that jittery feeling, and it can interfere with the release of some other hormones later on down in the day. So we want to really just be mindful of this and understand that coffee, it can still be included, but I recommend having a good quality protein, natural fat, rich breakfast first, and then having that cup of coffee either after breakfast or maybe even an hour or two later, so that our body has that time to release that cortisol naturally. The other piece of that is that when we consume the caffeine, oftentimes what it does is it suppresses our appetite. So if we weren't having that cup of coffee at all, even if we're not eating right away, we probably would eat within a couple of hours of waking. When we have that coffee and we push breakfast off even longer, especially for women, this can really set off this stress response where the body is thinking, okay, whoa, we're not getting any food right now. Like, are we facing a famine? What's going on? And what this can do for many women, if the goal is weight loss, it actually works in the opposite way that we want it to, because our body then holds on to stored body fat so that it can use it for energy, because our brains haven't quite caught up to these modern times, and it doesn't understand that most of us have access to food at all times. So it's really thinking, okay, if we're not getting food first thing in the morning, then we might be facing a famine, and we have to hang on to that extra stored body fat. And then what we also see happening is that if we aren't getting that protein in earlier in the day, then we see that showing up as those cravings, either, that 3:00 craving, or for some people, it's more after dinner where they've had dinner, they're not actually hungry, but their body is still undernourished from protein. So it's asking for fuel in any way that it can. And even though what it really needs is the protein and the natural fats, we see this showing up as cravings for a quick energy source, and that translates into sugar and those sugar cravings.
All of that for a cup of coffee.
Right. All for that cup of coffee, right? And like I said, I do like a good cup of coffee, but even if we can just, flip that a little bit and have some breakfast first, then it can really change the course of all of that.
Rachel, I've just enjoyed this conversation so much. As we wrap up, one thing that you wish all moms could know.
Well, it's probably something that they already know, but maybe just worth hearing from someone else, is that they are worth prioritizing. Their health is worth prioritizing, because if, then we have that option to be a good role model for our children. And really, at the end of the day, we can't help anybody else if we don't help ourselves first. So you are definitely worth prioritizing. And nourishing. So yeah.
Where can my listeners find you, and how can you help them with their sugar addiction, ditching the diets, and finding food freedom in their lives?
I'm Rachel Murray Holistic Nutrition across pretty much all the social media platforms. And then if you want to email me, it's just rachelmurraynutrition@gmail.com.
Great. You also have your Conquer Your Cravings checklist, right, on your website?
Yes. Yep. It's a free resource. So anyone can access that as well. And some just really great tips and strategies in there to help support anyone who's struggling with sugar cravings.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Rachel, for sharing so much great information about sugar. I appreciate it so much. I know that I had some great takeaways, and I know my listeners will too. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, Kimberly. It's a pleasure.
Wasn't that fantastic? Tell us in the comments what you learned from this conversation. Rachel and I would love to hear from you. Reach out to Rachel if you need more help ending the sugar cravings and balancing your hormones. You can find her and her Sugar Freedom Forever program at rachelmurrayholisticnutrition.ca. I'll leave her contact information in the show notes. If this episode helped you, share this with another mama you know who loves sugar too. Stay tuned for more conversations around renewing our health and our homes. Did you know that the Renewed Mama podcast is on YouTube and Rumble? If you like to watch video podcasts while you wash dishes or fold laundry, join me there. If the Renewed Mama podcast encourages you, would you leave a review on Apple Podcasts and YouTube? Your review helps the podcast to grow so that more mamas find it and can stay renewed too. I appreciate it so much. Thank you for listening to the Renewed Mama podcast. I appreciate you. I care about you so much. For more resources, visit the Renewed Mama podcast, Renewed Mama Coaching, Speak Life Badges, and Austin's Kids Club.